I discovered that my therapist of 5 years had been recording all of my sessions and selling them as a podcast called The Most Pathetic Woman. It had 4.8 million listeners. She was making about $180,000 a month. My family listened to it without knowing the woman in the episodes was me. It all started when my younger sister, Andrea, recommended a podcast to me. "You have to listen to it," she said. "It's called The Most Pathetic Woman. It's about a woman who doesn't realize her life is a complete mess. It's addictive." I didn't want to listen. It sounded cruel. But 3 weeks later, during a family lunch, my mom brought it up. "That podcast about the pathetic woman is incredible," she said. "Poor woman. She's so blind." My Aunt Laura laughed. I end up yelling at my phone. "Wake up already." My dad nodded. "It's frustrating, but I can't stop listening." Everyone in my family was listening to it. That night, out of curiosity, I searched for the podcast on Spotify. The Most Pathetic Woman. Episode 1 had been published 4 years and 11 months earlier. I froze. Exactly 5 years ago, I had started therapy with Dr. Patricia Ruiz. I pressed play. The voice was Patricia's but different. Colder. Sharper. "Hello listeners. Welcome to the most fascinating case of my career. This woman, whom I'll call M, is a perfect example of profound self-deception." My stomach tightened. She came to my office in tears because her husband cheated on her. The tragic part is that she thinks the problem is him. 5 years ago, my husband Carlos had cheated on me. I told Patricia during my very first session. I had never told anyone else. I kept listening, shaking. What M doesn't understand is that the real problem is her. She's insecure, emotionally dependent, and that pushes men away. I felt sick. I remembered telling Patricia how insecure I felt after the betrayal. She had told me it was normal, that it wasn't my fault. But on the podcast, she was saying the opposite. I opened episode 2. M forgave her husband immediately. Clearly, she has no self-respect. She accepts very little because she believes she deserves very little. The comments were even worse. "This woman is ridiculous. I'm embarrassed for her. How can someone be so unaware?" I checked the podcast details. 247 episodes. I had attended exactly 247 sessions with Patricia. 1 per week, every Tuesday at 4 p.m., for 5 years. Every secret I had shared had been turned into content. When I told her about my miscarriage. Episode 83. M lost a baby, and her first concern was whether her husband would leave her. Tragic. When I told her my sister had taken $15,000 from me. Episode 120. M is so passive she can't even confront her own family. When I told her about my darkest thoughts. Episode 192. M talked about ending her life again. A classic attempt to gain attention. I never said that. I had said that sometimes I didn't want to wake up. That was all. She had twisted it into something dramatic. Something consumable. I looked at the numbers. 4.8 million subscribers. 4 ads per episode. I did the math. About $180,000 a month. Over $2 million a year. All built on my pain. I found the consent form I had signed at my first appointment. It authorized the recording of sessions for therapeutic and research purposes. Research. That word justified everything. I texted my sister Andrea. "That podcast you recommended. How long have you been listening to it?" "Since episode 1, she replied. "Almost 5 years. It's my favorite." I asked my mom. Same answer. My dad had been listening for 4 years. My best friend Lucia for 3. Everyone had been listening to my life without knowing it was mine. Patricia had changed small details. My husband Carlos became Roberto. My age shifted by a few years. My profession changed. Just enough to blur the picture. Everything else was real. My words. My voice. My recorded tears. That night, I listened to 23 episodes without sleeping. In episode 147, Patricia said something that broke me. Honestly, M is never going to heal. But that works for me. The longer she stays in therapy, the more material I have. She never wanted to help me. She wanted me dependent. Because I was her business. The next day, I arrived at my 4 o'clock session. As always, Patricia greeted me with her warm smile. "Valeria, it's so good to see you. How was your week?" I sat on the gray couch where I had sat 247 times. On the coffee table was her small black recorder. As always, I acted normal. "It was a difficult week," I said. "Carlos and I had another fight." She nodded, writing in her notebook. "Tell me more." Now I understood. Those notes weren't therapy. They were a script. Episode 248. When the session ended, Patricia smiled. You're making wonderful progress. I'll see you next week. I paid the usual $200 and left the office. But I didn't leave the building. I waited in my car. 5 minutes later, Patricia walked out with a young woman, her assistant. Today's episode is going to be gold, Patricia said. Em finally admitted she feels invisible in her marriage. The listeners will love this. The assistant laughed. We're almost at 5 million subscribers. We should make merchandise. They laughed together. I sat in my car and cried. 5 years of trust. 5 years of payment. $52,000. And the betrayal was still not over. That night, my mom shared the new episode in the family WhatsApp group. Episode 248, she wrote. She admits she feels invisible. This woman just keeps getting worse. My sister replied, it's so frustrating. I would have given up already. My aunt added, she needs more than therapy. They were talking about me. The next day, I hired a lawyer who specialized in image rights. He reviewed the consent form. That's a clear violation, he said. You have a very strong case. Then I hired a private investigator. 3 days later, I received a 47-page report. Dr. Patricia Ruiz wasn't her real name. She was Patricia Sandoval. She had lost her psychology license in Texas 7 years earlier for violating patient confidentiality. She was practicing illegally in California under a false identity. But there was something else in the report. Something highlighted in yellow. Something that explained why she chose me. Why, out of all her patients, I became the centerpiece of her podcast. Patricia and I shared something. Something she never mentioned in 5 years of therapy. Something that changed everything. Because that connection between us was the real reason she chose me. The investigator had circled it in thick ink, as if he was afraid my eyes would slide over it and miss the point. He'd attached screenshots, a timeline, and 3 grainy photos taken from a parking garage across the street from a small, beige apartment complex in Culver City. One of the photos showed Patricia, no Sandoval, walking out of a building with her hair pulled back, sunglasses on, a tote bag against her hip. The next photo showed Carlos stepping out behind her. The last photo showed them standing close enough that their shoulders touched, his hand briefly on the small of her back, like it had been there 1,000 times and neither of them even noticed. My brain tried to reject it. It tried to bargain. It tried to invent alternate explanations, because that's what I trained myself to do for 5 years. But the report didn't stop there. There were bank records. In the months after Carlos cheated the first time, when I'd been sleeping in a guest room and crying in the shower so no one would hear, he had sent money to a woman under a different name. Not Patricia Ruiz. Not even Patricia Sandoval. Just an account that traced back to a Shell LLC that traced back to her. There were hotel receipts. Not in my name. Not in his. Booked through gift cards and third-party sites. There was one email thread recovered through a data broker. Not explicit, not romantic. Almost worse because it sounded like 2 professionals discussing inventory. We have another one who matches the profile, Sandoval wrote. Keep her dependent, the reply said. And then at the bottom, the subject line that made my fingers go cold. M. My stomach turned so hard I thought I might actually throw up onto the report. M. The initial she used on the podcast. The letter she chose like it was random. Like it was neutral. Like it wasn't a hook she'd sunk into me from the beginning. The secret connection between us wasn't blood. It wasn't some long-lost relative. It was my husband. My husband wasn't just the man who betrayed me once and worked on himself and cried and promised and swore. He was part of this. He was the reason she chose me. He was the reason she knew exactly where to cut. I sat there for a long time with the report spread across my kitchen table. My coffee untouched, the sunlight moving slowly across the pages like time itself was trying to turn them for me. Then my phone buzzed. Carlos, you okay? My throat made a sound that wasn't a sob and wasn't a laugh either. Something scraped. I didn't reply. I called my lawyer. He listened without interrupting while I read him the highlighted section. My voice flat, as if I was reading a grocery list and not the collapse of my life. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, we're going to treat this like a business operation. Because that's what it is. Can we stop it? I asked. It came out smaller than I wanted. Yes, he said. But we stop it the right way. The right way meant paperwork. It meant an emergency petition. It meant injunction language. It meant writing my pain into clean legal sentences that didn't shake or cry. The right way meant evidence. And that meant I had to keep going to therapy one more time. That was the part that made my skin crawl. The idea of sitting on that gray couch again, with her warm smile and her, "Tell me more," and that recorder sitting there like a little black mouth waiting to eat me. But my lawyer said, "Don't do anything illegal. Don't do anything reckless. Just go. Observe. Be calm. Let her hang herself with her own routine." So the following Tuesday, I went. At 4 o'clock, I sat on the couch. At 4:01, Patricia smiled like she always did. "Valeria," she said gently, "how was your week?" There was a second where I could hear two soundtracks at once. In the office, her voice was soft and professional. In my head, her podcast voice layered over it, colder, amused. "Hello, listeners. Welcome back. Em is finally unraveling." I looked at her hands. Her nails were a pale pink. Neat. Expensive. I'd noticed them 1,000 times and never once thought those fingers could do something cruel. "Hard," I said. She nodded, already reaching for her notebook. "Tell me what happened." I watched her pen. I watched how quickly she wrote when I spoke, and how she slowed down when she wanted me to expand. I realized I'd been feeding her for years like I was a source and she was a reporter. So I gave her something different. Not the truth. A shape of truth. A decoy. "Carlos has been trying," I said carefully. "He's more affectionate lately. It's confusing." Her eyes sharpened for half a second, like a camera focusing. "Confusing how?" "I don't know if I trust it," I said. "Part of me wonders if he's affectionate because he feels guilty." She smiled sympathetically. "That's a very normal response after betrayal." Normal. Research. Progress. Words she used like keys. She leaned forward slightly. "Has anything made you feel particularly anxious this week?" I thought about episode 1. Episode 2. Episode 192. I thought about how she turned my darkest thoughts into entertainment, and then let strangers throw stones at me for bleeding. "I've been having trouble sleeping," I said. "Any intrusive thoughts?" she asked, voice still gentle, eyes too interested. There it was. The angle. The clip she'd want. I met her gaze and softened my face, the way I'd learned to do when I didn't want someone to worry. "Nothing dangerous," I said. "Just that tired feeling. Like I want to disappear for a while." Her pen moved faster. Of course it did. Because she wasn't writing notes to help me. She was drafting episode 249. She asked about my childhood, my mother, my sister. The same familiar questions, fishing in the same familiar pond. I gave her clean answers. Safe answers. Answers that sounded raw but weren't. I watched her react anyway, satisfied, like she'd gotten exactly what she came for. At the end of the session, she did the thing she always did. She offered me a little summary, a little ribbon to tie around the hour, so it felt meaningful. "You're doing incredible work," she said. "It takes courage to face this." I nodded, even though my hands wanted to shake. Then she said almost casually, "And remember what we discussed last month? Your tendency to internalize responsibility for other people's actions? That's something we can keep exploring." Her eyes held mine as she said it, and for a second I wondered if she knew I knew. If this was a test. If she was enjoying the way my life had become a maze. I stood up. I handed her my card. I walked out. And I didn't cry until I got to my car, because I refused to give her that satisfaction for free. In the parking lot, I sat gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles looked bleached. Then I opened WhatsApp. The family group chat was still there, loud and alive, like my humiliation was a shared hobby. I scrolled up to last night's messages about episode 248. My mother's. "This woman keeps getting worse. How sad." My sister's. "It's so frustrating. I would have given up on her already." My aunt's. "She needs more than therapy. She needs a miracle." There was even a laughing emoji. I took screenshots of everything. My lawyer told me later. That's not the case. But it shows impact. It shows emotional damages. It shows reach. In other words, my family's cruelty was now evidence. That night we filed. The next morning, my lawyer also filed complaints with every board and office that could touch her. Not to punish her, yet, but to stop her from disappearing. Because people like Patricia didn't just lose. They ran. I didn't tell Carlos anything. I wanted him to think I was still the person who didn't know. I wanted him comfortable. Because comfort made people careless. By Friday, my lawyer called me and said, "We have a hearing date for the injunction request. Will it work?" I asked. "It should," he said. "But you need to understand they're going to fight. And they're going to smear you. Her entire business model relies on making you look unreliable. Like the podcast, I whispered. Yes, he said. Exactly like the podcast. That weekend, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went for a walk without asking permission from my anxiety. I left my phone in my pocket. I let the air hit my face. I tried to remember what it felt like to be a person whose emotions weren't someone else's product. But my calm didn't last. Because Sunday came. And Sunday meant family lunch. I almost didn't go. The thought of sitting at that table, watching them chew and laugh while they talked about a woman they didn't realize was me, made my stomach twist. But I went anyway. Because I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed to stop imagining it and start accepting it. My mother served chicken like it was any other week. My Aunt Laura told a story about someone at her job who cried over nothing, and everyone laughed. Andrea was scrolling on her phone and giggling. I didn't even have to guess what she was looking at. Halfway through lunch, my dad said, "Did you listen to the new episode?" My mother rolled her eyes. "She's exhausting." Andrea laughed. "It's like watching a car crash in slow motion." My aunt leaned in. "Sometimes I think she enjoys being miserable. Some people just do." They were talking about my recorded pain like it was a TV show. My fork clinked against my plate. I looked down to make sure my hands weren't shaking. And in that moment, something in me shifted. Not rage. Not even grief. Something colder. Clarity. They didn't deserve the version of me that kept trying to earn gentleness from people who treated suffering like entertainment. My mother noticed my silence and frowned. "Valeria? You're quiet." "Just tired," I said. She nodded, satisfied. "You should listen to the podcast less. It's depressing." I almost laughed. I almost said, "It's my life." Instead, I swallowed it. Because the court date was coming. And I wasn't going to waste my reveal on a lunch table, where they'd turn it into gossip by dessert. 2 days before the hearing, Carlos finally showed his hand. I came home from work and found him sitting on the couch. His expression already set to concerned. "We need to talk," he said. My heart did a small, ugly flip. "Okay," I said, putting my keys down slowly. He watched me like he was looking for cracks. "I got a weird email from a company," he said. "A legal notice. Something about a podcast." My blood went cold, but my face didn't move. He held up his phone. "Do you know anything about this?" I took a step closer and glanced at the screen. It was real. A preliminary notice sent to him because of shared finances, shared addresses, shared names in the record. My lawyer had warned me there might be spillover. Carlos had found out sooner than planned. My throat tightened. But then I realized something. If he was showing me the email, it meant he didn't know how much I knew. He thought he could manage this. He thought he could steer me. "What podcast?" I asked, letting my voice carry a note of confusion. He stared at me. "It's called The Most Pathetic Woman." I let myself blink slowly, like the name was unfamiliar. He exhaled hard. "Apparently they're claiming it's based on someone's therapy sessions. And the therapist's name is Patricia Ruiz." I tilted my head. "My therapist?" His face flickered. Just for a second. Then he forced concern back into place. "Yes. That's why I'm asking. This is insane, Valeria. You're not involved in anything like this, right?" The way he said right felt like a shove disguised as a question. My mind flashed to the photos in the report. His hand on her back. "Of course not," I said quietly. Carlos leaned forward. "We need to be careful. People sue for anything. What if your sessions? What if my sessions what?" I asked, letting a hint of sharpness slip through. He stopped himself. Swallowed. Tried again. "I'm just saying. If your therapist did something illegal, it could become messy." Messy. That word. Like my life was spilled milk. I stared at him. And suddenly, I understood him in a way I hadn't before. Carlos didn't look guilty. He looked afraid. Not afraid that I was hurt. Afraid that he might lose control of the story. "What did the notice say exactly?" I asked. He hesitated. "That," he cleared his throat. "That they're seeking an injunction and damages for unauthorized commercial exploitation." He'd read it carefully. Of course he had. He stood up and tried to touch my arm, like we were a team. "We'll handle this," he said softly. "Okay? Together." I wanted to rip my skin off. Instead, I smiled faintly and stepped back as if I was just tired. "I'm going to shower," I said. "I don't feel good." Upstairs, behind the bathroom door, I stared at myself in the mirror. My eyes looked too wide. My mouth too still. I looked like someone pretending not to drown. I texted my lawyer. Carlos knows something is happening. He got a notice. He replied a minute later, stay calm. Do not confront. We're on track. That night, Carlos tried to be extra tender. He made dinner. He asked about my day. He rubbed my shoulders. He said, I love you, in a way that sounded like a plea. And all I could think was, how long have you been rehearsing this? The hearing was on Thursday morning. I sat beside my lawyer in a building that smelled like old paper and anxiety, wearing a blouse that made me look composed even though I felt like a cracked glass held together with tape. Across the room, Patricia Sandoval sat with her own attorney. She had changed her hair color. A little darker. She wore glasses she didn't usually wear. She looked like a woman trying to look harmless. When her eyes met mine, she smiled. Not the warm office smile. Not the sympathetic therapist smile. A small, private smile that said, I know you're here because of me. Her attorney spoke first. He tried to paint the podcast as educational, transformative, anonymized. He said the consent form I signed gave her permission to record. He said there was no proof it was me. He said the plaintiff was paranoid, emotionally unstable, projecting. Then my lawyer stood. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't dramatize. He simply laid out the timeline. 5 years of weekly sessions, 247 episodes, matching details, matching cadence, matching life events. He displayed the consent document and pointed at the words, therapeutic and research purposes. He displayed evidence of ads, sponsorships, merch plans, subscription revenue. He displayed screenshots of her bragging about content. He displayed the investigator's report about her license loss and false identity. He didn't even need to say the word predatory. It sat in the air anyway. The judge asked Patricia directly, are you licensed to practice psychology in this state under this name? Patricia's attorney jumped in, but the judge held up a hand. Patricia's smile was gone now. Her mouth tightened. She answered carefully, I have credentials, Your Honor. That wasn't the question, the judge said. Patricia's eyes flicked toward me. For the first time, there was something like irritation there. Not guilt. Not shame. Annoyance. Like I was a customer refusing to pay. Her lawyer tried again, talking about content creation, storytelling, free speech. And then my lawyer dropped the line that made the room go quiet. Your Honor, she didn't just share information, he said. She sold the recordings of a vulnerable person's private medical sessions as entertainment. She made money on distress. She encouraged dependence for profit. Patricia's jaw tightened so hard I could see a muscle jump. The judge leaned back, looked at the documents, then looked at Patricia. I'm granting the temporary injunction, he said. My breath caught. He continued. The podcast must be taken down pending further proceedings. No new episodes. No distribution of existing episodes. Patricia's attorney started to protest. The judge cut him off. And I'm also ordering preservation of all materials, he said. All recordings. All notes. All drafts. Anything related to production. If anything disappears, there will be consequences. For the first time in weeks, I felt something in my chest loosen. Not relief. Not yet. But a crack of air. After the hearing, my lawyer squeezed my shoulder. Good first step, he said. Outside, the sun was too bright. I stood on the courthouse steps and tried to remember how to breathe normally. That's when I heard Patricia behind me. Valeria. I froze. My lawyer had told me not to speak to her. But my body turned anyway, as if pulled. She stood a few feet away, her attorney on one side, her production assistant on the other, both pretending they weren't listening. Up close, she looked older than she did in her office. Not wrinkled. Just worn. Her smile was thin. I'm sorry you feel hurt, she said. The phrasing was perfect. A non apology. A therapist's dodge. I don't feel hurt, I said before I could stop myself. My voice was steady, which surprised me. I feel robbed. Her eyes sharpened. You signed the consent. For research, I said. Not for your merch mugs. The assistant flinched. Patricia's smile slipped. Then she sighed, as if I was an inconvenient child. You don't understand how this works, she said softly. People want stories. People need stories. They wanted my life, I said. Without my permission. She tilted her head. Permission is complicated. My lawyer stepped between us. We're done here. Patricia's gaze stayed on me. And then she said something so quiet only I could hear it. If you take this from me, she whispered, you'll regret it. I didn't answer. I walked away. But her words followed me all the way to my car like a shadow. That night everything exploded. Because the podcast didn't just quietly disappear. It vanished. Episodes gone. Spotify page blank. Instagram account deactivated. Merch store taken down. And when something that big disappears, people notice. Fans flooded comment sections on unrelated posts asking what happened. Sponsors got tagged. Someone created a hashtag. Hashtag where is most pathetic woman? And because the internet hates a vacuum, the internet started filling it. Rumors spread. Some people said she was cancelled. Some said she'd been hacked. Some said she'd been arrested. And then a smaller group, the ones who always existed, quiet and watching, started asking the question that made my skin prickle. Is Em real? Is she a real person? Was this a real patient? My phone buzzed. Andrea, did you see? The podcast is gone. My mom, what happened? Did Spotify remove it? My Aunt Laura, I hope she comes back. I was in the middle of episode 214. My dad weird. Carlos walked into the room while the messages were coming in, holding his phone like it was burning him. It's gone, he said. I looked at him, at the tension in his jaw, at the way his eyes kept darting to my face. He was watching me, testing me, measuring. I saw, I said. He swallowed. Do you think it's related to you? I met his gaze, and I made a choice. Not the final reveal. Not yet. But the first crack. Yes, I said quietly. Ido. His face drained. What? He whispered. I let my voice stay calm. I hired a lawyer. Carlos took a step toward me. Valeria. I know, I said, cutting him off gently. I know she used my sessions. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked like a man who'd walked into a room he thought he controlled, and found someone else holding the remote. How do you know? He demanded. I watched him. I watched the panic. And I realized he wasn't asking because he cared how I found out. He was asking because he needed to know how much evidence existed. I know, I repeated. He stared at me like I was a stranger. Then he did what he always did when he felt cornered. He tried to flip it. Why didn't you come to me? He asked, voice rising. Why would you do this without talking to me? I almost laughed again. Because the audacity was so clean it could have been scripted. Because you would have tried to stop me, I said. His eyes flashed. No, You would have said it's messy, I said. You would have said it could affect our finances. You would have said we should keep things private. He opened his mouth, and I saw it then. He wasn't even sure which lie he wanted to use. That's when my phone buzzed again. A number I didn't recognize. I answered without thinking because my body was already in fight or flight. Hello. A woman's voice, low and urgent. Valeria Sandoval? My throat tightened. Sandoval. Her real name. Now mine in her mouth. Yes, I said cautiously. This is Detective Morales, the woman said. I'm calling because we received a report regarding Patricia Sandoval practicing under a false identity. We need to ask you some questions. Carlos froze. His face went white. And in that instant I knew. He knew. He had always known. Maybe not every detail. Maybe not the podcast from day one. But he knew who she was. He knew her name. He knew enough to be scared now. Detective Morales continued speaking, but my ears were ringing. Carlos grabbed his keys from the table like his body had decided for him. I need air, he muttered. He walked out. And he didn't come back for 3 hours. When he returned, he wasn't alone. He came back with a story. He said he'd met Patricia once at a conference years ago. He said she'd been strange but professional. He said he never imagined. He piled words on top of words, trying to build a bridge back to the version of him that looked innocent. I didn't speak. I didn't interrupt. I didn't accuse. I just watched. Because I didn't need his confession. I had bank records, photos, emails, and soon subpoenas. Over the next 2 weeks, the case grew teeth. Platforms responded to the injunction. Sponsors quietly pulled away. Her production assistant deleted her socials, then reactivated them under a new name. Patricia's attorney sent me a letter calling me mentally unstable and accusing me of defamation. My lawyer laughed when he read it. Classic, he said. Meanwhile, my family kept texting about the missing podcast like it was a show that got canceled mid-season. It would have been funny if it didn't make me want to scream. Andrea. Someone posted that she got sued. Can you believe it? My mom. People are so sensitive these days. My aunt. If she comes back, I hope Em finally leaves that man. She's humiliating herself. I stared at their messages until the words blurred. Then I did something I hadn't planned to do yet. I created a new WhatsApp group. Just me. Just my mom, dad, Andrea, and Aunt Laura. No cousins. Nonois. I named it, family. And I sent one message. You've been listening to me. There was silence. Then Andrea responded with a laughing emoji. Stop. I sent another message. It was my voice. A 30-second clip my lawyer had obtained through a legal request from one of the platforms that had cached the audio before takedown. My voice, crying softly, saying Carlos's name, saying something only my family knew. Something I'd said in session once, in a moment of raw nostalgia, my childhood nickname for my dad, a stupid, affectionate name no one outside our house had ever used. The typing bubbles appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. My mom. What is this? My dad. Valeria? Andrea, is that you? My aunt. Oh my God. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding, my hands steady in a way they had no right to be. Yes, I typed. That was me. Every week. For 5 years. You've been laughing at my therapy sessions. Andrea, no. No way. My mom. That can't be real. Why would she? My dad. When did you record that? I felt something sharp rise in my chest. I didn't record it, I typed. She did. And she sold it. My mom. But she changed details. Me, yes. Because she didn't want you to recognize me. Andrea, this is insane. My aunt. I feel sick. My mother didn't apologize. Not then. She wrote. Why didn't you tell us? I stared at that question until my vision shook. Because you were enjoying it, I typed. Because it made you feel better about yourselves. Because you didn't care who she was hurting as long as it wasn't you. My dad. Valeria, that's not. I cut him off with words I'd never said out loud to them. You called me pathetic. All of you. Every week. For entertainment. Andrea sent a string of crying emojis. My aunt wrote, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. My mother wrote nothing for a long time. Then finally, this isn't our fault. We didn't know. I read it twice. 3 times. And something in me hardened into a clean line. It became very simple. You didn't know it was me, I typed. But you enjoyed the cruelty anyway. Then I left the group. I didn't block them. I just stepped out. Because I was done arguing with people who thought ignorance erased impact. That night, Carlos tried to crawl back into bed like nothing was changing. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to his breathing. At 2 o'clock in the morning he whispered my name. Valeria. I didn't answer. He shifted, nervous. Are you going to destroy me too? 2. The word hit me like a slap. 2. As if I'd already destroyed Patricia. As if I was a weapon and not a person trying to survive. I turned my head slowly in the dark. I'm going to tell the truth, I said. He went quiet. I didn't know, he whispered after a long time. I almost said, I have the photos. I almost said, I have the bank transfers. I almost said, I saw your hand on her back. Instead, I said, then you have nothing to fear. He didn't sleep after that. Neither did I. In the weeks that followed, the discovery phase began. Subpoenas went out. Files were demanded. Servers were mirrored. Patricia's team tried to claim they lost access to certain accounts. The judge wasn't amused. Every time her attorney tried to paint me as unstable, my lawyer calmly slid another piece of evidence across the table. Every time they tried to argue consent, my lawyer circled the word research again and again like a bell. And then one afternoon, my lawyer called me with a tight, satisfied tone. We got something, he said. What? My voice barely worked. A production document, he said. A spreadsheet. Episode planning. Monetization targets. My skin crawled. And there's a column labeled acquisition, he said. As in acquiring patience. I gripped the edge of my counter. What does it say? He exhaled. It says you weren't the first. My mouth went dry. There are at least 14 other initials, he continued. Some with timestamps that match weekly therapy schedules. Some with notes like good content, high engagement, heavy crying, family betrayal arc. I felt my vision tilt. I wasn't a case. I wasn't even special. I was a format. Patricia had built a factory out of human breakdown. And, my lawyer added, there's something else. What? There's a note attached to your file, he said. A directive. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. He read it out loud. Keep her marriage intact. Keep her coming. Increase dependence. She trusts authority. She's high yield. My breath left me. Keep her marriage intact. Not for my well-being. To keep the content flowing. To keep the weekly payments. To keep the narrative consistent. My lawyer's voice softened. Valeria, do you understand what this means for Carlos? I swallowed. It meant he wasn't just a husband who cheated. He was part of an ecosystem that profited from me staying trapped. He might have brought me to her. He might have encouraged it. He might have benefited from it. Or at the very least, he'd enjoyed how therapy kept me quiet and self-blaming and pliable. That night, when Carlos came home, I didn't fight. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I simply set a folder on the table. He stared at it. What's that? Discovery, I said. His face tightened. You're not supposed to see it? I finished calmly. I'm not supposed to see the truth? He swallowed. Valeria, this is getting out of control. I watched him carefully. The nerve. After everything, he still wanted to control the narrative. I opened the folder and slid the printed directive across the table. His eyes scanned it. And for a second, his mask slipped. Not guilt. Recognition. Then his face shut down. He dropped the paper like it burned. This is crazy, he said, voice sharp. This proves nothing. I leaned forward. My entire life has been recorded for 5 years, I said quietly. And you're still trying to tell me what's real. He stood up abruptly. You're spiraling. There it was. The old tactic. Label her unstable. Make her doubt herself. Make her apologize for reacting to harm. I stood too. I'm not spiraling, I said. I'm waking up. His eyes flashed. Valeria, you're going to ruin everything. I stared at him. Everything. Not me. Not my dignity. Not my privacy. Everything. I nodded slowly. Good. He looked stunned, like he didn't recognize the woman standing in front of him. Then he said the thing that finished it. If you go through with this, he said, voice low, people are going to hear things. Things you said. Things that will make you look bad. Threat. Blackmail wrapped in concern. My stomach turned. But my voice was calm. They already heard, I said. For years. And I survived it. His face twisted. Valeria. I want a divorce, I said. The silence that followed was so thick it felt like the air itself froze. Carlos's mouth opened, closed. Then he laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. You're not serious. I didn't blink. I am. His smile vanished. And for the first time in our entire marriage, I saw fear in him that wasn't about losing me. It was about losing control. What are you going to tell people? He demanded. I thought about the podcast listeners, millions of strangers who'd been trained to see me as pathetic. I thought about my family, who'd consumed my suffering like dessert. I thought about Patricia, who'd packaged my breakdown into a brand. I'm going to tell the truth, I said. Carlos's eyes narrowed. And the truth is what? That you're a victim? That everyone did this to you? I stepped closer, my voice quiet. The truth, I said, is that I trusted the wrong people. And I'm done paying for it. He stared at me like he wanted to say something cruel. Like he wanted to push me back into the old shape. Then he walked past me, grabbed his keys, and left. This time I didn't cry. I sat on the couch with the folder in my lap, and I felt something strange. Not happiness. Not peace. A beginning. Over the next month, the case became bigger than me. A journalist reached out to my lawyer. Then another. Then a third. Because once the injunction happened, other people started searching their own memories. Other patients started listening to archived clips and hearing their own voices. One woman wrote an email to my lawyer that said, I thought it was fiction until I heard my laugh. Another wrote, she described my miscarriage like it was a joke. I can't breathe. More complaints came in. More names. More initials turned into people. And suddenly Patricia's operation wasn't just a scandal. It was a pattern. She tried to flee. We found out from the investigator that she'd booked a flight under another alias. The judge issued an order. Her accounts were frozen. She was pulled aside at the airport. Not handcuffed in some dramatic scene like movies. Just stopped. Delayed. Contained. Because that's how real consequences start. Quiet, procedural, unavoidable. My lawyer called me the day it happened. She's not going anywhere, he said. I sat down on my kitchen floor, because my legs stopped working. I pressed my palm to my mouth, because the sound that wanted to come out of me was too big. After everything, after 5 years of being turned into content, after being mocked by strangers and unknowingly by my own family, she couldn't just vanish. She would have to face it. The trial date was set for months later, but life didn't pause in the meantime. I moved into a small apartment across town. I bought a new couch. It wasn't gray. I chose it on purpose. I started sleeping through the night for the first time in years, not because everything was fixed, but because I wasn't waking up with the feeling that someone was watching me. Carlos sent messages. Long ones at first. Then angry ones. Then pitying ones. Then silent. Andrea tried to call. My mother sent a paragraph apology that somehow still managed to center her own feelings. I didn't answer. Not because I hated her. Because I was still learning how to live without explaining myself to people who treated my pain like background noise. And for the first time in my life, I allowed myself to choose me without negotiating. On a Tuesday afternoon, months after everything, I passed by the building where Patricia's office had been. The sign was gone. The windows were empty. For a moment, I stood on the sidewalk and watched people walk past like nothing had happened there. Like no one's life had been harvested behind that glass. Then I turned away. And I kept walking. Because my story was finally mine again. Not M. Not content. Not a case. Not a brand. Just me. Valeria.